You step onto a plane almost without thinking about it. You find your seat, you put on your seatbelt, you glance at the safety card for maybe 2 seconds before sliding it back into the pocket. Your brain has already decided this is routine. But on a handful of days in history, routine broke completely, and thousands of people who buckled their seatbelts the exact same way never landed at all. This is the story of the deadliest moments in aviation history. Not to scare you, to show you something stranger than fear. Because almost none of these disasters happened the way you'd expect. Start with the number that towers over every other crash in history. 583 people. Not in the air, on the ground. Tenerife, 1977. Two Boeing 747s, both Pan Am and KLM, parked on a small runway on a small island because a bomb threat had shut down their original destination. Fog rolled in so thick that pilots could barely see past the nose of their own aircraft. The KLM captain, one of the most experienced pilots in his airline's history, began his takeoff roll without full clearance from the tower. The Pan Am plane was still taxiing on that same runway, hidden in the fog. By the time anyone saw the other aircraft, it was too late to stop, too late to lift off cleanly, too late for anything except impact. Investigators later pointed to something almost mundane: miscommunication, a misheard phrase over the radio, a pilot who believed he had permission he didn't have. Aviation researcher Charles Perrow would later use disasters like this one to define what he called a normal accident, a catastrophe born not from one big failure, but from a chain of small, ordinary failures lining up perfectly. Fog, radio static, a confident captain who didn't double-check. None of these alone kills anyone. Together, they killed 583. Here's the strange part. Tenerife wasn't caused by a mechanical failure. It was caused by communication. After this crash, the entire industry rewrote its rules. Standardized phrases, mandatory readbacks. The words "takeoff" became forbidden in ordinary radio chatter unless an actual takeoff clearance was being given. Your modern flight is safer today because of a fog bank on a Spanish island decades before you were born. Now go higher into the air and into a disaster almost too strange to believe. Japan Airlines Flight 123, 1985. 520 people died, the worst single aircraft accident in history. 12 years earlier, the same Boeing 747 had suffered minor damage to its tail in a hard landing. Boeing technicians repaired it, but they made an error in that repair, one tiny mistake in how the metal was reinforced. For 12 years, that plane flew normally. Thousands of flights, nothing wrong. Metal fatigue doesn't announce itself. It builds quietly, invisibly, cycle after cycle of pressurization and depressurization, until one day, 32,000 feet over Japan, the rear pressure bulkhead simply gave way. The explosive decompression tore off most of the tail and severed all 4 hydraulic systems at once, something the aircraft's designers considered nearly impossible. The pilots fought the plane for over 30 minutes with almost no control surfaces left, using only engine thrust to steer. Cockpit voice recordings captured them working the problem calmly, almost methodically, until the very end. What does this teach you? That catastrophe can be sitting quietly inside something you trust for over a decade, waiting on one specific afternoon to reveal itself. The bolt that holds your world together was tightened by a person, and people make mistakes that metal remembers far longer than memory does. Move now to a different kind of horror. Not mechanical, not weather, a bomb. Air India Flight 182, 1985, 693 feet above the Atlantic instantly. 329 people. A suitcase bomb planted by extremists, targeting a political conflict thousands of miles from the ocean below. There was no warning, no struggle, no 30 minutes of pilots fighting for control. One moment the aircraft existed, the next it didn't. Terrorism researcher Brian Jenkins, who spent decades studying aviation security, often pointed out something uncomfortable. Aircraft are uniquely attractive targets, precisely because they concentrate so many lives into one small, fragile space. A single device, properly placed, can erase hundreds of people the way a falling rock erases an anthill. After this crash and others like it, airport security transformed. Baggage screening became mandatory worldwide. The plastic bin you toss your shoes into at the airport, the liquids rule, the body scanner you grumble about, these exist because of bombs hidden in luggage decades ago. Your inconvenience today is the descendant of someone else's tragedy. Now consider something even harder to process. A crash caused not by an enemy, but by the very people sworn to protect the aircraft. Iran Air Flight 655, 1988. 290 people. A civilian Airbus shot down by a United States Navy warship that mistook it for an attacking military jet during a tense moment in the Persian Gulf. The missile operators acted on radar data they misread under pressure. There was no malice. There was confusion, stress, and a system designed to make split-second decisions with imperfect information. Psychologist Gary Klein, who studies decision-making under extreme time pressure, has spent his career examining exactly these kinds of moments, how trained professionals, under enough stress, can see a pattern that genuinely isn't there. The radar showed something descending. It was actually climbing. The human mind, flooded with adrenaline, filled the gap with the most threatening interpretation available. You do this too, on a much smaller scale, every single day. A dark shape in your peripheral vision becomes a threat before your conscious mind catches up. Evolution built you to assume danger first and ask questions later. On a warship in 1988, that same ancient wiring helped end 290 lives in seconds. There's a quieter category of disaster too, the slow one. The one where everyone on board knows exactly what's happening. Saudi Flight 163, 1980. A cargo fire ignited shortly after takeoff from Riyadh. The crew successfully turned the aircraft around and landed it safely back at the airport. Investigators later confirmed the landing itself was not the failure. What killed all 301 people aboard was what happened after touchdown. A critical delay before the crew evacuated, while smoke and toxic gas filled the cabin. By the time rescuers opened the doors, there was nothing left to save. This is perhaps the cruelest entry on this list, because the crash itself wasn't fatal. The plane landed. The wheels touched down on solid ground. And still, almost everyone died in the gap between survival and rescue. Notice what links almost every disaster on this list. It's rarely one single cause. It's never just the storm, or just the mechanical part, or just the human mistake. It's always a chain, 3 or 4 small failures, each one survivable on its own, stacking together into something no one could stop in time. That idea has a name in aviation safety circles, the Swiss cheese model, developed by psychologist James Reason. Imagine several slices of cheese stacked together, each one full of holes. Most of the time, the holes don't line up, and any single failure gets blocked by the next layer of defense. Tenerife happened because the holes lined up. Japan Airlines 123 happened because the holes lined up. Every disaster on this list is, in some sense, a story about holes in different slices of cheese finally lining up on one unbearable day. Here's what's strange about all of this. You probably already know that flying is, statistically, one of the safest things you will ever do. Each one of these tragedies, brutal as it was, didn't just claim lives, it rewrote a rulebook. The radio phrases pilots use today exist because of Tenerife. The metal fatigue inspections airlines perform exist because of Japan Airlines 123. The security checkpoint you walked through last time you flew exists because of Air India 182. You are, in a very real sense, protected by the dead. And for the first time, maybe you understand exactly why that's possible at all.